And now, a Scared for Reals Extra.
Hey, it's Chris O'Neill.
And Adam Perry.
The Strangers.
Yes.
We got a new Stranger movie out in theaters. Strangers Chapter 1. But before we talk about the new Strangers, we're going to talk about the first one. And FYI, spoiler alert, we're going to be talking about both movies from start to finish. Mm-hmm. I've got a leg up on Adam this time. Usually he sees all these movies before I do, but this time around, I've seen one more than he has.
All right. Hey, life happens, and
oh, I know.
But hey, that's cool that you got out to see it. I'm itching to see it because I did enjoy the first one.
So we're going to talk about that one first.
Yep.
2008. You have Brian Bertino not only writing but directing. He's written the other two Strangers movies, but this one he directed. Got a $9 million budget. Turns out movie made $82.5 million.
What a return.
That was a massive return.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. It's like you'd think a sequel would follow immediately, but 10 years after the first one.
Yeah.
And then like 6 years after that one, you get the third one. So let's talk about the 2008 psychological horror film. And you've got this couple, Liv Tyler, Scott Speedman. They stay at a vacation home disrupted by 3 masked intruders. Now, it's not as simple as that because, Liv Tyler and Scott Speedman characters, they attended a wedding. Couple's distraught after, Liv Tyler turned down the marriage proposal from Scott Speedman. So Scott Speedman's tapping into the alcohol right off the bat. He calls his friend Mike, asks to pick him up in the morning. Mm-hmm. And of course, they try to have a little romance to heat things up. Well, it gets heated up in other ways because they a loud knock at the door. They find a young woman asking if Tamara is at home. Scott Speedman dismisses her, builds a fire because there's no one named Tamara ever in any of these movies.
No.
So James, Scott Speedman's character, goes to purchase some cigarettes for Liv Tyler because she's out. So the woman from earlier returns asking for the same question. Is Tamara home? And she gets dismissed again. A masked man is seen silently watching her from inside the house.
Creepy.
Yeah.
Creepy.
It's stuff we've seen 1,000 times, but it's very unsettling in these movies.
Yeah. It's something I really enjoyed about this movie. It's the basic slasher formula, but
right.
The way it's shot in this movie, the creep factor really gets you.
Right.
I really enjoyed this first movie. I know a lot of people didn't. Particularly my brother. He had some sort of issues with it, but I don't know. I like the randomness of it, the randomness of these killers. I think as the slasher genre grew, every killer had to be explained. Every killer had to have a backstory. We don't even know these the names of these characters.
Right.
We just know them by their masks, and I think that's really cool and really unique. That it's just so random.
Right.
And it's scary.
Yeah,
it's a scary thought.
And Liv Tyler, after she doesn't see the masked guy, that's one thing. The audience sees something that
yes.
the main characters don't. It's a big thing that Hitchcock used to do. The audience would get a little heads up, but the main characters had no clue of what was going on. Right. Hitchcock was the master of that. So Liv Tyler notices the smoke alarm she dropped on the floor is now sitting on a chair. And she seems to think there's someone in the house, Adam. And she finds her cell phone is missing, horrified when the front door is forced ajar. The young woman, who's now wearing a mask, and that was another cool thing, is this young girl didn't have a mask on, but she was in the dark. You couldn't see her.
Yes.
So that was kind of a clever technique. So the young woman peers into the house. She locks the door, retreats, and lo and behold, Scott Speedman returns and reassures Liv Tyler that nobody is in the house. Well, they see the young masked woman watching their house from outside. So Scott Speedman attempts to get his cell phone from the car because, whoops, I accidentally left something behind. And let me go out into the dark parking lot and grab something.
Where there's a creepy lady staring at us. Yeah.
I mean, it's very formulistic, but the couple attempts to break into the car because, well, that's what they do.
Right.
But they're abruptly stopped when the masked brunette woman rear-ends them in a pickup truck. So try to escape in the car, but can't do it. Can't do it. So, well, they have to go back into the house, and then another character appears. It's his best friend, Mike. Well, he doesn't last too long, does he?
No, he doesn't.
So Mike goes into the house, notices all the stuff that's all over the floor, ransacked, and goes up the stairs and gets shot in the head.
Yeah. And again, twist, the one person who could probably save them from the torture and the terror that they're going through. Right. They accidentally kill it. It's not the killers getting them. It's they accidentally murder this guy.
Well, these killers know exactly. They seem to have a good knack for this kind of stuff.
Right.
So, well, Mike, their only hope, they shoot him. He remembers an old radio transmitters in a barn on the property. So this is, I think it's either his father's house or his grandfather's house. I can't remember which. It is kind of alluded to that it's a family house.
Right.
So he remembers about this old radio transmitter. He goes into the barn. He leaves, and the man in the mask knocks him unconscious. He doesn't get to the barn. And eventually he does the same to Liv Tyler inside the house. Now, the couple awakens. They're tied to chairs in the living room. Liv Tyler demands an explanation. Because you were home.
Terrifying.
It is.
Again.
And it was said with such cold, deadpan delivery.
Yeah. And the only reason why this is happening is because you were here.
Right. Right.
And again, I love that. It's
in the new trailer. Why are you doing this? Because you were here.
Yeah. It's an ongoing theme.
Right.
It's and again, when you're oversaturated with these slasher movies and everybody's now has a motive and a backstory.
Right. Even Jason had a backstory. His mom was the killer in the first one.
Yeah,
because they let her son drown. So therefore, Jason now has a whole backstory. There you have it.
Right, and I mean the closest thing to it is the original Halloween. But
even Mike has a backstory. Even in the first Halloween,
he has a backstory. Yeah, that's right. But I mean,
these guys have no backstory.
No,
none.
No, I was getting at more of the randomness because again, if you don't think of the sequel of Halloween, the brother-sister element of it.
I try not to get into the Halloween sequels myself.
I know you don't. Michael Myers just sees Jamie Lee Curtis and he just decides that, all right, that's my victim tonight. If you break it down, and it's similar to The Strangers, that these people are just there and, all right, time for us to do our thing.
Right.
If I can bring some true crime into this. It reminded me very much of the Manson family. The Manson family were known, before the murders of the Tate and LaBianca murders, they were known to just sneak into random houses in the middle of the night, eat people's food, mess with their stuff, look at them as they were sleeping in California.
Right.
They would just quietly sneak in and just wander around random people's houses. Knowing that, and then, seeing this movie as a very eerie Manson family feel to this.
Well, he was partially inspired by that too.
Yeah.
He really was. And you can tell the followers of Charles Manson were probably more twisted than Manson himself.
Sure.
They're tripped out on all sorts of drugs. God knows how many types of drugs at once.
Right.
Because they did find drugs on them.
Well, I mean, we're talking, I
don't want to get too much into the Manson.
But Manson had complete control over them. So
he was, you want to talk about a master manipulator.
Oh, absolutely.
Other than our politicians, he's probably like right up there.
Yeah.
And the interesting thing is they do take off their masks.
Yep.
But you don't see them. I'm glad Brian Bertino did not do that.
Right.
So they just take turns stabbing them randomly, and they leave, come across two young boys distributing Mormon religious tracts. And there are some church stuff that's being floated around in the new Strangers movie, which I'll talk about in just a bit. The boy gives Dollface one and the strangers drive away. And that's the only dialogue that they actually like say is, we'll do it better next time. That's the only one of them seems kind of distraught and don't worry, we'll do it better next time. Whoa. Was it their first time doing this? Well, we don't know. We don't need to know. They just did it. It's quite a way to leave the movie, but they make it clearly obvious that Scott Speedman's character dies.
Right.
But then Liv Tyler like kind of has a kind of moment at the end.
Right.
And that's how the movie ends. So it seems like she survives. You don't know.
Right.
Was anyone on the 911 line and able to kind of trace where she was? We don't know.
No.
Which is kind of a great way to end the movie. This movie, there's portrayals of violence, a reflection of contemporary culture, writing. I mean, if we want to dig deep into the themes of the movie, 9/11 horror, being in the wrong place at the wrong time, a bunch of cliche stuff. And also, I mean, let's face it, a lot of times you have arguments with your wife, I have arguments with mine. A lot of times, what did we argue about? Sometimes it's just so kind of silly. And turning down a marriage proposal is a big thing. It's kind of shameful for a guy. Demasculating in a certain sense, and you feel embarrassed. There's all sorts of emotions. You're angry. You're also hurt. You're sad.
Yeah.
You're depressed. But at the same time, you don't feel like a real man. And there's all sorts of stuff that goes into it. There's a lot of feelings. But then that all kind of pales in comparison when things like this happen, when you're randomly chosen as murder victims.
Right.
You don't expect it to happen. And I mean, it's just the whole movie is just so one downer after another.
Right.
Might as well just pop in a sad anti-war film because it's same.
Yeah.
There's like a sense of dread right from the start.
Yeah.
I'm not knocking the movie. It's better than a lot of the slasher films that have come out in the past 20 years. I will say that.
But again, to me, that was kind of like what I was unique about it, because it didn't just start with like teenagers happy-go-lucky living life to the fullest. It showed real life problems and people dealing with real life problems, and then all of a sudden they have to kind of bond together to try to survive this nightmare.
Well, you see, I kind of think about Apocalypto. Remember that Mel Gibson movie?
Yep.
They're fighting amongst themselves. They're sacrificing other people's tribe members. It's tribe against tribe. And the last surviving tribe member is running for his life. And he comes to the shore. He sees the Mayflower and all sorts of ships coming in, and there's going to be bigger problems ahead.
All right.
And that's what I think of this movie. It's like, Liv Tyler, Scott Speedman, they're having a down part in their relationship. It's really miserable for them. But there's bigger problems in the world, people. And boy, oh boy.
There's major problems about to happen.
And I'm not saying their problems are insignificant, but in this story, they are compared to the grand scheme of things. And a lot of times as us couples fight, sometimes we just, why did we fight in the first place? What was that all about? I don't know. But there's bigger problems in the world to focus on. That's what I got out of it, too. Again, let's talk about the inspiration here, because Brian Bertino, he was originally, I guess the original title was called The Faces. It was the third screenplay he'd ever written. He had a particular interest in the horror genre, noting how one can connect to an audience by scaring them, and he would state in a lot of interviews that he grew up watching horror films, like the thrillers of the 1970s, and he envisioned a film that he could put the audience in the world of the victims. And boy, does he do it in this movie.
Sure, definitely.
And he literally said there was one instance, and there's one instance that was inspired by a real life event that happened to him. And it wasn't as brutal as the killings, but he said as a kid he lived in a house on a street in the middle of nowhere, and one night, while the parents were out, somebody knocked on the front door, and my little sister answered it, and there were some people asking for somebody who didn't live there. And they later found out that these people were knocking on doors in the area, and if no one was home, they broke into the houses and stole stuff. So, I mean, that's kind of traumatic for a child. I mean, just, is so-and-so here? No, it's just weird. At night, they're all by themselves. It's like a horror movie in itself, And he also stated he was very impressed with some of the theories circulating on the internet about the true events. And like you alluded to, big time was the Helter Skelter Manson murders.
Right.
They also compare it to the French horror film Them, which was released 2 years earlier. Couple terrorized by strangers in the middle of nowhere kind of thing. You think with $80+ million gross that there would be an immediate sequel, but
No.
10 years after the original, The Strangers Pray at Night, which I did not see. I wasn't really had any want to see the first Strangers movie. When this one came out, I'm like, oh, it'd be a good movie to talk about on the Scared for Reals podcast, which you can subscribe to, by the way, by just hitting the subscribe button. I always forget to plug that. I'm plugging it now. I figured it would be a good. We both figured it'd be a good discussion for the show. Okay, I'll sit through the first Strangers, and it wasn't that bad. It was above a lot of the movies at that time. I didn't really like a lot of the horror movies that came out in that time.
In the early 2000s, yeah, they were.
Well, even the Scream movies. The first Scream I thought was overrated. And a lot of people would shoot me for that, but. I like the satire part of it.
Right.
That's a running theme in all the Scream movies is the satire.
Right.
Which I do kind of appreciate, but I just wish the movies were better. I don't know. I just didn't. The first one was okay. I think I saw part of the second one, but I'm trying to think of all there was a lot of. Some of them were interesting concepts in the early 2000s, like Identity was an interesting concept, but. The big reveal at the end was like, okay,
Yeah, but we also got to remember in horror realm eras, this is the height of the remake boom.
Right. So it was also post 9/11 too.
Yeah.
So horror movies were treated a little differently then.
They were, but again, a lot of the big movies you're seeing coming out in this time are the remakes. So to see an original like The Strangers pop out.
Because Rob Zombie's Halloween just came out not too long before this.
Yeah, and a year before that, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the sequels that followed that. And they were remaking everything that they could get their hands on.
Right.
So again, to see a fresh take with The Strangers was huge. And I didn't see the sequels either, and as much as I enjoyed the original, I think it's because of the time period between the original movie and the sequel. I just forgot about it.
Yeah. Well, I heard a lot of buzz about the Strangers, and a lot of people in the horror film world really liked it.
Yeah,
they really liked it. But us movie snobs, we're above this. And again, it was a lot better than a lot of the movies of that time frame. I did like Rob Zombie's Halloween, but like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre reboots I thought were awful.
I enjoyed the first one, but the sequels after that I didn't really care for.
But anyway, Strangers Pray at Night comes out like 10 years after the original. $5 million budget, made over $30 million. Bertino doesn't direct this time. It's Johan Roberts and. Brian Bertino co-wrote the screenplay. But after the events of the first film, secluded trailer park in Ohio, the three masked strangers, Dollface, Pinup Girl, and the Man in the Mask arrive and murder middle-aged couple Cheryl and Marvin. I didn't watch this first one, so I didn't watch the sequel, so I can't really comment on this one, but it did very well. Filmed in Kentucky, which was interesting. Some good rural areas in Kentucky.
Yeah.
So. The critics hated it, of course. And I don't even think the horror films. I don't remember people talking about this one as much.
No. I think. What was the cast? You didn't really have.
It wasn't I don't think it was a well-known cast. $5 million.
Right.
Let's see. Christina Hendricks. She's like a stage actress, and I think she's been in some primetime shows.
Right.
Martin Henderson is kind of known. He's one of those character actors. He's probably best known for playing Dr. Riggs on Grey's Anatomy. Mm-hmm. But yeah, those are the biggest names. You got Bill Pullman's son is in there, but
in the first one you have Liv Tyler, who's fresh off of Armageddon, That Thing You Do, and everything else. She was big at the time. Scott
Speedman just did Underworld a few years prior.
Yeah,
and he was. They were trying to build both of those up to be both of them big stars. And unfortunately, none of them.
Their careers kind of both petered out. But
really,
I've always loved Liv Tyler. So
Well, I know you're just anything related to Aerosmith. You're
why not?
So you had that one, and again, it did modestly well. It made a lot of money. Mm-hmm. It made $25 million over budget. So, which leads us to talk about Strangers Chapter 1, which is in theaters right now. And this is the first installment of a trilogy, apparently, because it's Chapter 1.
Okay.
So again, if you haven't been to the theaters yet to see Strangers Chapter 1, they've already announced a Blu-ray release date a couple months from now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's like Hollywood needs to stop doing this. Let the movie breathe. Again, we reminisce the video store days of the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I wanted to see Heat. I didn't get to see Heat in theaters in 1995. I had to wait till 1996
Right.
before I was able to rent it. And if I wanted to buy it, well, when did they start selling previously viewed videos? It was, I think, late 90s maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So I wasn't able to purchase Heat to own until years later.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you wanted to buy a new release, it was like $100 in the 80s and 90s to buy a VHS copy.
Yeah.
It was crazy. I don't think they need to do exactly that, but they really need to delay the streaming time from theaters and also delay the releases of videos as well.
Right.
But Strangers Chapter 1, first in a trilogy. So the premise, you've got this young couple, Maya, driving across the country with her longtime boyfriend. They say 5 years they've been dating. Like, they go into this secluded restaurant. We're celebrating our anniversary, 5 years. Oh, you've been married? No, we've only been dating. And they all get kind of dirty looks from everyone. And they get a lot of judgment calls on that one. But so they drive across country. Their road trip celebrating their 5-year anniversary. Along the way, their car breaks down in a town called Venus, Oregon. Venus, Oregon. And they're forced to spend the night in an isolated Airbnb home. Now, the car doesn't really break down. Like, when they get to the restaurant, it seems to be running fine. It's like the sudden horror elements that just come out of nowhere. Like a car almost crashes into them head on.
Yeah.
Right. They're kissing when he should be paying attention to the road.
Right.
So he almost gets in a head on collision. And, it freaks them out. And they got a long ways to go. They're both hungry, so they stop at a diner. And he tries to start up his car, but the battery or the alternator went.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those fancy schmancy cars. And of course, somehow the town is so small. I think she comments there's only like 200, like 300 or 400 people that live in the town. Mm-hmm. So it's a very small town. They make a comment about it when they're in the car, but. And you got this old-fashioned, creepy-looking mechanic who happens to be, he knocks on the window, having car problems, says it in a real creepy voice.
Right.
Where it's like kind of alluding that everyone is kind of suspect here as being a creepy,
right.
These guys from the city, these two kids from the city, and they're getting a lot of dirty looks, and they don't feel very welcome there.
No.
And, the boyfriend being Mr. Macho tries to drop a few jokes and doesn't go over well. But so they have to spend the night there. There's an Airbnb they're able to get out in the secluded woods, out in the middle of nowhere. Everything seems hunky-dory, and then loud knock on the door, and just like the first Strangers movie, is Tamara here? Well, there's no one here by that, and and then all sorts of strange sounds happen. And of course, the main character, Ryan, here happens to be asthmatic. He has to have an inhaler, and they left the inhaler in the car. So he has to, there happens to be a motorcycle.
Yeah.
So he takes the motorcycle back into town and picks up his inhaler, and then he has an encounter with the mechanic who's like, "Hey, what are you doing? Getting into my car. I left, there's like an altercation making, it's just a lot of like tension building moments.
Right.
That's what this movie's all about, is tension building moments. And then, that's when weird things start to happen, because the girl knocks on the door again while he's out. He's getting food and everything like that. And is Tamara home? And no one by that name lives here. And she's starting to get creeped out a little bit.
Right.
And then just all sorts of stuff start to happen. She playing the piano and the man in the mask is right behind her the whole time, sitting there listening. She's playing a Beethoven piece.
It's creepy.
Yeah, very creepy stuff. A lot of tension building. I have to say, even though they're very cliche tension building moments, they build it up very well in these movies. In these two movies, I didn't see the second one, but these movies they seem to build it up pretty well. Even though it's a situation, it's cliche. I mean, after Hitchcock's done it all these many times, how can you surprise anyone anymore? So, I mean, the way they build the tension is interesting. It's cliche, but it's entertaining at least.
Well, I mean, cliche it may be, but again, it just goes to if you do it right or you do it with a unique take, you can still make it effective. Mm-hmm. You know,
it's not as unique as the hand because they used a handheld camera the whole time in the first one.
Yep.
So the camera's constantly moving, so it gives it more of it makes you uncomfortable.
Right.
This one, they didn't seem to do that. The camera pans around a lot,
right,
but it doesn't feel like you're moving with the camera.
Gotcha.
It's not as if they're trying to do it from the victim's point of view, like the first one, they didn't succeed as well. But it's still very, very entertaining enough. And of course, you know, they axe through the door, they break down the front door, they come in and start terrorizing her. And then she hides herself in a closet, and then someone, you know, climbing up the stairs. Oh, it's the boyfriend. He's back with the food. Mm-hmm. Oh, there's no one here. There's no one in the house. You probably just saw this creepy-looking painting, and you know, she's still not comfortable with that. And they're eating, and then they find blood from a carcass dripping on their food. And
oh, wow.
And of course, the creepy girl's standing outside, just like in the first one. And then, you know, just all hell breaks loose. You know, one by one, they try to outdo the three killers.
Yeah.
At this point, they're doing like the Max Cady thing in Cape Fear. They're not really doing too much harm. They're kind of just on the precipice of doing something bad. Mm-hmm. They're just, you know, breaking down the door. Okay, that was pretty intense. It scared them, but they're just playing around with them.
Right.
At this point. So then, well, it leads to kind of a chase. They try to, after the whole dripping of the food, and then they get secluded in a bedroom. They go through the crawl space of the house. She puts her hand on top of a nail, and they have to get the nail out. A lot of fun, isn't this?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you like to be stuck in the situation with your wife?
No.
Yeah, it would not be fun. So they're able to get out of the crawl space. They get into this little shack, and they're trying to find stuff, and they come over there, terrorize them over there. But somehow Ryan finds a shotgun and scares. It kind of holds them off for a little bit. Mm-hmm. So he hears one of them trying to sneak in, and boom, shoots one of them in the head. But it turns out to be the owner of the Airbnb.
Of course.
Because she had called him earlier. The refrigerator was out, and she wanted to make mention of it.
Yeah.
So he was just coming over and just being helpful. And again, the one person that could potentially help them out,
yeah,
they end up wasting them themselves. And and of course, they're kind of distraught over that. But he leaves behind a pickup truck, so they try to escape. And it's just almost like a rehash of the first one, because they get slammed and by their pickup truck, which somehow seems to be more powerful. Mm-hmm. One of those old-fashioned ones. I guess they're more. So they get slammed into like several times, so that, they can't escape.
Yeah.
As much as they want to, and they come close. They came close a couple of times. Then it leads into a big chase in the forest. And I have to say, the atmosphere in this is really cool. They filmed this in Slovakia, apparently.
Oh, wow.
All the filming locations. And Slovakia makes for a pretty creepy premise, especially in the woods there. Mm-hmm. I horror movies, maybe they should do more filming over there, because there was some creepy stuff out there. It really made for a good vibe, good horror movie vibe. I think that was probably the best part, is the atmosphere of it. Like literally Slovakia, it was pretty freaky. Mm-hmm. So the last half of the movie is actually the most entertaining, stuck out in the forest. She's in one part of the forest, the the girl's focused on trying to track him down, and the masked man is kind of following his girl, but the wife or the woman is tracking her down. And
Interesting.
Of course, she Maya is very meek. She's not going to do much, so she gets knocked out by the other female masked.
Yeah.
What are they? It's like they call them. They have specific names in the second one. I'm trying to go back to that. Doll face, pinup girl, and man in the mask.
Yeah.
So I think the doll face one is the more mature female because she's singing some sort of lullaby as she's dragging Maya, who's kind of dazed at this point. And then the girl who had been kind of terrorizing them, just looking into the house and all that kind of stuff, he actually gets the upper hand on her. Ryan does. She's kind of laughing at it though, because she knows a lot of stuff he doesn't.
Yeah. And
he goes, the first time I killed, you know how hard that is? She goes, yeah. Well, I've already done that. And before he can, click the trigger of the shotgun, the man in the mask, boom, from behind knocks him out.
Wow.
So that was the closest they came to escaping.
Yeah.
If he would have just shut up and just shot her,
right.
I think he would have had a better shot. I mean, he probably would have still died, but at least he would have taken one with him. But.
Yeah.
So, then they're tied up. The usual, why are you doing this? Because you're here. And then they get stabbed. But the twist in this one is he dies, or seemingly he dies, because his eyes are wide open. He's bled to death. But then you find that Maya wakes up in a hospital at the end.
Oh.
And in a post-credit scene, she tries to get up from her hospital bed, and then you see one of the masked people next to her, and then at the end. It's to be continued.
Yeah.
To be continued, so it's kind of anticlimactic to a certain degree. And I thought it was kind of underwhelming, the climax of this one.
Right.
Because it's like, okay, they get stabbed. Okay.
Well, I mean, like you said, there's going to be
two more.
Yeah.
But it's
and the next one's coming out later this year.
Yeah. Well, the thing it happened with the Spider-Verse movies is they don't really have like a cool climax. Like, look at Lord of the Rings. Perfect example. 3 separate stories. They're all one big story, but they all have 3 amazing climaxes. As a matter of fact, Return of the King has like 3 or 4 in one story. But, I mean, there's at least one big climatic thing that ends each movie. So it's like, you feel satisfied.
Yeah.
That's the only drawback to something like this is they literally tease it, and it's like they could have done a better job of making it more impactful, so where you're satisfied. So I had a snack basically, but I like a gourmet meal, and I like to feel satisfied after.
Right.
And it was better than most of these type of slasher films that they've come out with, but it was a little underwhelming, unfortunately, at the end of chapter 1. But we'll see what chapter 2 brings.
Yeah.
Now, you had a date. You said it's opening later on this year, huh?
Yeah, it doesn't give a date. It just says chapter 2 is expected to be out later this year, and no specific date for chapter 3.
Gotcha. $8.5 million budget. As I'm speaking, the opening weekend, the opening day, they made over $1 million back in one day. So, I mean, they're going to have enough money to make 2 and 3.
Sure.
Because that's the thing. More of these major studio films, if they don't necessarily have to make it for like 1 or 2 million, 25 million would be okay, better than 250, 400 million in some cases. Some of these movies cost.
we just did the tribute show to Roger Corman. What represents Roger Corman more than this? A very low budget movie making bank. Same thing with the original one. The original one I think was an $8 million budget too.
Yeah. And it made like 80 something million. But that's the thing. Like the only producer who's constantly, whether you love or hate his work, he's had a couple of big successes. Jason Blum. Yeah, he's kind of the only one that can be considered, I think, the Roger Corman of his generation. Right. I mean, he's had massive success with Whiplash and Get Out. Those have made him a ton of money, but they didn't cost a lot to make. Right. His movies, I think, 20-something million is the most his movies cost.
Yeah, even his Halloween movies, the budgets weren't that high.
No.
Yeah.
No, and you can make a good movie. I mean, Whiplash is a masterpiece. It's like 10 years old, and people are still quoting it, talking about it.
Right.
Get Out is, if we want to talk about horror movies, that is just, it's mind blowing how great that movie was.
Right.
It really is, and even Us was pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, again, the first, you can never top the original.
Yeah.
You really can't. The first Strangers was really good. It a lot better than I expected. Let's just put it that way. This new one, it wasn't bad. I don't think I'll ever watch it again, but it's an interesting one-time watch. And again, I loved Slovakia. I mean, it's very freaky at night.
Right.
Yeah, I love how it was shot. I mean, it was well shot, and the tension building. There was some good tension in there. If people haven't seen the first Strangers movie, I don't think they need to see any of the other ones to grasp the concept. But I mean, if you've already seen the first Strangers, it's pretty much a rehash.
Gotcha.
Only with a couple of small twists like at the end. So again, spoiler alert, we already talked about the whole movie from start to finish. But yeah, I mean, it's not a bad date night horror movie if you and your significant other enjoy watching a horror movie. There's a lot worse horror movies that have been released this year. Mm-hmm. They were done by Blumhouse too.
Right.
But it's a good date night movie. It's nothing too spectacular. Not bad either.
I can't wait to see it.
All right. So did you see any of the Strangers movies? Did you watch all three, or have you seen only one? If you haven't, either way, comment, subscribe, become a subscriber for Scared for Reals on YouTube. Just comment below. Tell us what you thought about these movies, or if you want to drop some suggestions on what you'd like us to rant on about next. Again, reach out through YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram. We're Scared for Reals. You can find us everywhere.
We'll see you next time on Scared for Reals.